The world of Sonic the Hedgehog has been thrust into a not-so-dark, not-so-stormy hard-boiled detective story that probably nobody saw coming. Follow Sonic and the intrepid Chaotix Detective Agency as they take on their biggest case yet. This high-flying, action-packed adventure will take them across the world, fighting for every clue they can find. It's one heck of a tale, which is good, because this story might be the only thing that can save their lives.
Well, if that's all, I can just dispose of you.
Wait, what?
All will be revealed in Sonic the Hedgehog presents The Chaotix Case Files. Listen now, wherever you get your podcasts.
When the Chaotix are on the case.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
This is True Crime Cast. Jamie, joined by John. For the first time in weeks, neither of us are coughing up a lung.
I thought you were going to say not snowed in.
Well, I mean, also that. I mean,
no longer
at
snowed
least
in.
not today. Knock on something.
Thank God nobody's sick anymore. It has been, man, we were like so far ahead, and now we're not.
Yeah,
but
we're getting there. We'll get back to it.
Yeah.
Being snowed in helped our podcasting lives, but then we shared germs, and that hurt it.
I think we both hosted an event at church, and I think maybe that was ground zero of what was the man cold turned almost deadly.
Yeah, I got the man flu, and it was not pretty, especially if you ask my wife how I react to that kind of thing. Before we get going with today's episode, I want to give a thank you to a couple 5-star reviews that have come in over on Apple Podcasts. This is from Katie Houston. Says, my new favorite, I really enjoy these guys. I love how they communicate the story and with each other. This one comes from S.Stick91. Great show. They do their research, and I listen while at work. Keep up the great work, guys. We included a wrong name in the au pair episode, and that was all me. So
well, it happens. I mean, we've done 800 episodes. I'm sure we've mistakenly made some, errors along the way. But hey, we saw the message. We admit our mistake. It was not on purpose. And thanks for correcting us, man.
Yep, we appreciate that. And we do try to do full research. So thanks for those reviews. If you have a 5-star review you want to send in on Apple Podcasts, social media, we will read it on the show.
Do want to mention that we released a new Patreon episode this weekend, and that is called The Lipstick Killer.
Oh, buddy.
That was a really, really good case. So I don't want to give you too many details here. You need to go over to Patreon and check it out for really as low as $3 a month. You have access to it and all of our other exclusive episodes. And most of the time you get early ad-free content as well. Yeah.
So we've done over 800 episodes for public consumption. There's another almost 100 or so over there on Patreon. So
never before released episodes that will only be available to you all as Patreon members. Jamie, this is a case that is right up your alley.
I've been so excited about this. I love spies, international espionage, and I love mafia stuff. Give me all the mafia stuff.
Before we get started, I want to remind you, Jamie, did you know, wasn't there like a loose connection to this guy coming to our church a long time ago?
I vaguely remember this, but I don't know that happened.
All right.
I'm not fully confident in it.
I don't think it ever happened, but there was a possibility. Let's go back to 1985.
It was a good year.
I was a year old, celebrating my first Christmas on December 16th, 1985. Let's go to
Marty McFly, going back in the DeLorean. It was a good year.
We're going to go to Midtown Manhattan, and it was alive with holiday energy. I think you and your family have been to Manhattan over the holidays. I've never been, have no desire to go.
It's a lot. Yeah,
a lot of people.
Even in 85, I bet it was pretty crowded.
There were people all over the sidewalks. Tourists were filling the streets just days before Christmas. And outside Sparks Steakhouse on East 46th Street, there was a black Lincoln Town Car pulled quietly to the curb, carrying one of the most powerful and feared men in organized crime. Inside that car was Paul Castellano, the head of the Gambino crime family, the largest and wealthiest mafia organization in America. So you're telling me that this is real life and this is not just for movies and TV shows?
This is not just for movie. I mean, the movies are based off real stuff. We've got a lot of former mafiosos coming out doing interviews now and really just confirming what we already thought we knew about these crime families. And that's what it is. Like, it's crime families. It's not just a gang or that kind of thing. Like, it's very close knit and it's taken super seriously.
So Paul Castellano, is that how you say that?
I would say Castellano.
Castellano.
Yeah, it's Italian.
Yeah, Paul Castellano was not just another mob boss. He controlled a bunch of stuff. It was a massive criminal enterprise. He had construction unions. He had millions of dollars in illegal revenue flowing through New York City. And he stepped out onto the sidewalk. He was bundled because of its extreme cold. And witnesses later say that everything happened almost instantly. 4 men came out from the shadows wearing long coats and fur hats, disguises meant to obscure their identities. And without warning, they opened fire in a coordinated execution.
This is the part of the movie where the music gets really slow and it plays like classical music while the guns are going off.
Yeah. So this is happening on a busy street. So pedestrians froze in their spots. They were in shock. They were unsure whether to run, duck for cover, whatever. But Castellano and his driver, Thomas Biotti.
Yeah, that's one L. I would say Bilotti.
They collapsed onto the pavement. They both died at the scene within minutes. And the assassins, they calmly walked away. They disappeared into waiting cars before police could arrive. So this was a murder, but it was also a direct violation of mafia law. Killing a boss without approval from the mafia's governing body, known as the Commission, was known as an act of rebellion, and it signaled a violent takeover, and investigators had to quickly realize that someone had orchestrated this coup.
Yeah, it's a lot of rules within the mafia on people you can and can't kill, when, where, how you can kill them, and what makes it justifiable between families, what makes it justifiable within families, what people are actually born into the family, what people are made men being welcomed, and what are the rights between the two, like the laws. I mean, I'm sure there are books and books about mafia law, which is what I wish I would have studied in college. But
you talk about it at family reunions.
Have you ever seen the movie The Godfather, John? This is the disappointing part. Have you seen it?
Yeah, it's been a long time
I thought
ago.
you hadn't seen it. Yeah.
No, I watched it. It wasn't that great.
It was. It's one of the best movies ever, and this is an offer you can't refuse.
Yes, I'll put a horse head in bed with you.
So the guy that orchestrated this hit was John Gotti, the focus of today's story, and he soon became the most famous mafia boss in modern American history. Unlike his predecessors, he didn't believe in hiding in the shadows or avoiding public attention. Everybody knew the heads of the families, but they wouldn't get out much. Part of that so they wouldn't get killed themselves. But he really leaned into this persona, turning himself into a larger-than-life public figure. He wore perfectly tailored Italian suits that reportedly cost thousands of dollars each, paired with silk ties, styled silver hair, custom suede shoes, the whole bit. Photographers would find him out, and he had a social club he liked to hang out at, and they would take pictures of him all the time. He loved it. He would smile for the crowd, wave, and tell jokes with reporters. It's kind of like living the life of a celebrity, and he really enjoyed that part of it. Over time, prosecutors brought up charges against him again and again: conspiracy to commit murder, actual murder, racketeering, but somehow he kept walking away. Just when it would come time to go to trial, witnesses would disappear, jurors would change their mind because of intimidation, cases collapsed in really unbelievable and spectacular fashion. The media started calling him the Teflon Don.
Because nothing would stick to him.
Nothing would stick to him, just like the non-stick coating on cookware. So I really like that one. Each acquittal only made his legend grow, and it also reinforced to him that he was untouchable. He really felt that way. But beneath the expensive suits, the big smile was a man whose rise had been fueled by violence, intimidation, and underhanded betrayal, which, in case you haven't figured out how the mafia works, if you cross somebody to get ahead, eventually somebody's going to cross you. And that would happen down the line.
Let's get to know John from his early life. John Joseph Gotti was born October 27, 1940, in the Bronx, New York. He was the fifth of 13 children. He was born to Italian immigrant parents. They were struggling to survive during and after the Great Depression, and then he was born just right at the beginning of World War II. His father, whose name was also John, worked quite irregular jobs as a laborer. He often was unable to provide steady income for his family. His family eventually had to move to East New York in Brooklyn, which was a neighborhood known for poverty. It was also very heavily influenced by the mafia at the time. I say at the time, like maybe things are still the same. I don't know.
I mean, these families still exist, and I'm sure it's much different than it was in the 50s and 60s, but to say that it doesn't exist anymore is pretty ignorant.
Well, back then, organized crime wasn't even that hidden. It was part of everyday life. It was visible in the form of social clubs, expensive cars, and men who seemed immune to consequences, which is what you were describing John as earlier. Young John grew up watching those men closely. He noticed the respect that they commanded and the fear that they inspired. So while his family struggled financially, these men appeared powerful, secure, and it offered a very different life than what he had grown up with and what he was used to. Later, teachers described Gotti as disruptive and disengaged. He would skip school and get into fights. Wait, I thought we were talking about John Gotti. I feel like you're talking about this John.
Not True Crime Cast John. One in the same in some ways.
He showed very little interest in academics and far more interest in the street culture that surrounded him there in New York.
Which is super common around that time. And I mean, that's why you have a lot of the stereotypes of mafia families and Italians to some degree. By the age of 12, he had joined a neighborhood gang known as the Fulton Rockaway Boys. Sounds like it could be a gang or potentially a boy band.
I was thinking that sounded like a quartet.
He would eventually join this group, and they would become deeply connected to organized crime. So this is like his foot in the door. They stole cars, they robbed trucks that were delivering goods, and sometimes helped mafia crews by acting as lookouts or running errands for them. For teenagers growing up in that environment, crime wasn't just common, it was seen as a path to success, stability, and respect. It was a legitimate career option for a lot of these kids. Gotti dropped out of school when he was 16, which ended any chance he had of a more conventional career, even growing up to be a laborer like his dad. He tried a few jobs in factories, driving trucks, but those didn't pay anything compared to what he could make running errands for the mob. Around this same time, he started running with a different group, a little bit older than him, who were already on the fringes of being in the Gambino crime family. Gotti was paying attention. He was looking at how things worked, trying to get a feel for what life was like, who gave the orders, who carried them out, who got paid, and he wanted to get in on this. In 1962, he got married to a woman named Victoria DiGiorgio, and the couple would eventually have 5 kids. At this time, it looked like John Gotti was a normal family man, but behind the scenes, he was becoming more and more embedded in the world of organized crime.
Gotti's entry into the mafia came through his association with a man named Carmen Fatico. This was a Gambino capo who operated out of Social Club in Queens. What is a capo?
Yeah, like an officer, like a captain, somebody who's out there actually calling shots, getting things done. So kind of a boss, not like the main, not the Godfather boss, but a lower level boss.
So I'm going to be a nerd and tell you that in 1940s, like during the times where there were concentration camps, a capo was like a Jewish person who was put in charge. So even though he was a Jew, the other Jewish people would end up hating them because the capos, while they were Jewish, kind of acted more like the German people that,
Right.
you know, they were a prisoner, but they were given privileges.
Right.
So anyway.
And obviously this is around that, I mean, a little bit after that time. So wonder how much of that was just like European language, how much of that may have been stolen, and even the impact of that word happening during World War II and during the concentration camps. Did that make it carry more disdain or more power in the mafia? I don't know.
As a teenager, Gotti ran errands for Fatico. I'm going to say Fatico, and I'm sorry.
That's
I just
fine.
think it's great.
Yeah, it's
Fatico?
it's what I
don't know.
envision.
So this crew, he ran errands for them and quickly made himself useful. But the man who would become his true mentor, Agnello Della Croce, the Gambino family's powerful underboss who took Gotti under his wing and recognized his potential. So under their guidance, Gotti became involved in hijacking cargo shipments, particularly those moving through the John F. Kennedy International Airport. So these thefts targeted trucks carrying electronics, clothing, alcohol, and all kinds of valuable goods that they ended up reselling quickly on the black market. Cargo hijacking was enormously profitable and relatively low risk compared to other crimes, so this made it a staple of mafia operations throughout the 1960s. Gotti's crew became known for their efficiency and their willingness to use violence when necessary. In 1968, federal authorities arrested Gotti for hijacking, and he ended up being sentenced to prison. Rather than ending his criminal career, the prison sentence enhanced his reputation, proving his willingness to accept punishment without cooperating with the authorities.
I mean,
so he wasn't going to turn and be a snitch.
Right. Loyalty is everything to these families. And if he shows that he's willing to suffer through being loyal, then that earns him all the respect in the world. And
he could have easily taken some deals to talk about people who were above him. So I think this solidified his spot as a family member.
Also great way to get you killed. And then you go to prison, and what do? You sit and learn from other people who have done this for years.
And probably recruiting some that, can do your dirty work.
Right. Even inside prison, they need people in there to carry out hits and such. This is, again, so fascinating to me. But he went to prison. When we get back from the break, I'll talk about what happened when he got out of prison and how quickly he rose to power in the Gambino family.
The world of Sonic the Hedgehog has been thrust into a not-so-dark, not-so-stormy hard-boiled detective story that probably nobody saw coming. Follow Sonic and the intrepid Chaotix Detective Agency as they take on their biggest case yet. This high-flying, action-packed adventure will take them across the world, fighting for every clue they can find. It's one heck of a tale, which is good, because this story might be the only thing that can save their lives.
No. Well, if that's all, I can just dispose of you.
Wait, what?
All will be revealed in Sonic the Hedgehog presents The Chaotix Case Files. Listen now, wherever you get your podcasts.
When the chaotics are on the case.
Serving less than 4 years, Gotti got out of prison for this hijacking charge in 1972. In 1973, he participated in the murder of James McBratney, an Irish gangster who had kidnapped and killed Emmanuel Gambino, a nephew of mob boss Carlo Gambino himself. So, you kidnap my nephew, I have you taken care of, and that's essentially what happened. This was a sanctioned, approved mafia hit carried out as revenge, and it put Gotti directly on Carlo Gambino's radar. So Gotti's gone from this efficient hijacker, he took one for the team and went to prison. Now he's being noticed by the boss, and this lets him get more and more respect, and obviously it's going to lead to more power. He was arrested as part of this, and he accepted a plea deal, serving only a few more years in prison, but again, remaining loyal and not telling anybody who he worked with or what had happened. It reinforced his credibility with the mafia. So when he got out, they were ready to take care of him. He became a made man in the Gambino family in 1977, swearing an oath of loyalty that bound him permanently to the organization. This is both a promotion for him, and in some ways it's a life sentence, because once you get into a crime family, there's no way you can leave alive. There's no way you can just say, all right, guys, I quit. When you're in for good. And being a made man essentially is you were not a part of the family originally, but they think enough of you to bring you in. So you're an outsider, and there are even different sets of rules for made men and true family members, but he's on the inside now.
Let me tell you a story that just kind of sums up who John Gotti was. March 18, 1980, there was a tragedy that struck the Gotti's family. So Gotti's 12-year-old son, Frank, was outside riding his bike, minding his own business in the neighborhood in Queens. And there was a neighbor named John Favre. So this neighbor accidentally ran over John Gotti's son, Frank, with his car, and it killed the kid. So police got there, they ruled the incident an accident. Favre was not charged. There were no charges going to be filed against him. This was just a tragic accident. And by all accounts, this neighbor was devastated. He apologized to John and his family. He brought food to the Gotti home in an attempt to just express his remorse. But despite his best efforts, there were some serious tension in the neighborhood. 4 months later, Favre was abducted outside his workplace by some unidentified men, and he was never seen again. His body was never found, and no charges were ever filed.
So we don't even know what happened, right? Yeah. What happened to this guy? He must have run away.
But people in the neighborhood knew exactly what had happened and who had ordered it. So, but this guy, nobody's going to file charges on him. They're
right.
Unidentified men. So it's a needle in a haystack.
And in some ways, no charges being filed against him may have been an effort to keep him out and available so they could kill him, right?
Yeah.
Am I getting too far down the rabbit hole there?
I don't know. Investigators strongly suspected that Gotti had ordered the killing, but without witnesses or any kind of physical evidence, prosecutors could not move forward. The disappearance, though, reinforced that Gotti's growing reputation as someone who would retaliate without hesitation. So this was something that, I don't know, the court had ruled an accident, but Gotti was just hell-bent on getting revenge. So this kind of solidified his place. Like, don't cross this guy. John will have you killed and nobody will ever find you. So for people in this world, the message was unmistakable. Crossing John Gotti, even unintentionally, would have fatal consequences. The grief over Frank's death never fully left the family. And, rightfully so. This is tragic. Those close to John Gotti said that the loss hardened him in ways that were visible for the rest of his life. His son's Frank's bedroom in the family home was said to have remained untouched for years after his death.
Yeah, and this, you mentioned that he became somebody you don't mess with, and it's amazing that back in this time, they didn't have the internet, they couldn't even text each other, but everybody knew that if you messed with anybody that John Gotti cared about, you were going to pay for it. And it got around quickly, and there was never a doubt. Now, when longtime boss Carlo Gambino died, leadership passed to Paul Castellano, who we mentioned earlier, and some people thought it should have gone to Aniello Della Croce, who was Gotti's mentor. We mentioned earlier, he was an underboss in the family, and they thought he was the rightful heir, but Castellano got the nod. It felt like a snub, and it created a lot of tension within the Gambino family, a lot of resentment, particularly among people who followed Della Croce like Gotti did. Castellano favored white-collar crime and preferred to keep his distance from traditional street crews, which is how Gotti came up too. He came up doing the hijackings. You do a lot of protecting businesses, like they will pay you to make sure they don't get robbed or pay you to make sure another family doesn't take advantage of them. But Castellano wanted to do more high-level crime and not get their hands dirty as much. And to a lot of people, this felt like a betrayal to the lifestyle of mafiosos. The tension came to a head when the FBI started surveilling Gambino operations, and they picked up evidence that Gotti's crew was involved in heroin trafficking. Not a shock. Pretty much any drug that you could get, they were involved in making money off of it. Any way you could make money, the mafia was involved. But officially, drug dealing was forbidden under mafia rules and could be punishable by death. When Castellano found this out, he was furious. And Gotti had strong reason to believe that he was going to be on Castellano's hit list after being an up-and-comer, De La Croce's essentially mentee or protege. And now Gotti is feeling like he's going to be killed by Castellano for getting caught in this drug business. Gotti, though, decided to act first. He organized Castellano's assassination without getting approval from the commission, which was a direct violation of mafia law. But this was a risk that Gotti was willing to take, because if he didn't do something, he was going to get killed anyway. If this worked, he would remain untouchable. If it didn't work, he was going to be killed, but he would get killed doing nothing anyway. So this, to him, was worth the risk, and that's the assassination we started the show off with.
Yeah, so going back to that, December 16th, 1985, this attack was meticulously planned out. So Gotti was not one of the men that came out of the shadows. He watched from a car nearby as everything in the shooting unfolded. So after Castellano and his driver fell on the sidewalk outside Sparks, Gotti's car slowly drove past to confirm that the job was indeed done. And within days, Gotti moved quickly to consolidate power. He met with Gambino captains and secured their loyalty. So despite violating mafia protocol, he gained enough internal support to secure his position as the new mob boss. So really, almost overnight, he became the most powerful mafia boss in America, controlling thousands of members and associates involved in criminal enterprises across the country. He did all that, and he was just 45 years old.
Now, look, we talk about mafia families. This isn't like a family reunion type setting. Like you've got a grandpa and his kids and their kids. This is, again, thousands of people are involved in this, and there are different bosses and underbosses and lieutenants, and there's so many different roles. It's a very structured, almost like a military, but they're, instead of carrying out military operations, they're carrying out money-making operations. So he's a made man, not originally born into the mafia, and he's 45 years old, and he's on top of the world, which is just unheard of, which is why we're talking about him here today. His case is different from other mafia bosses. He immediately moved his base of operations to the Ravenite Social Club in Manhattan's Little Italy neighborhood, where reporters gathered daily to try to get a picture of him. Like we said earlier, he welcomed that. He would arrive in a chauffeured car, step out into the sidewalk dressed impeccably, and hold court on the street like he was the mayor. In a neighborhood where he had grown up poor, admiring powerful men, he had become the kind of guy that he looked up to. In 1986, federal prosecutors indicted Gotti on racketeering charges. Racketeering is basically kind of what I talked about earlier, of charging people money not to steal from them, charging people money to protect them, charging people money for a variety of reasons. The trial was widely watched, and the government believed the case was strong. But when the verdict came back, not guilty, the courtroom exploded. This was the first major sign that even with the odds stacked against him, even with evidence, Gotti's reach extended beyond the streets of Manhattan. One of the jurors, at least one of the jurors, had been bribed or intimidated to change their vote.
Yeah, the acquittals kept coming. In 1987, he beat another racketeering case. Each time prosecutors thought they had him, the case quickly unraveled. Like you said earlier, witnesses recanted, jurors flipped, and evidence went sideways. The tabloids turned him into almost like folk anti-hero, the working class kid from Brooklyn who kept outwitting the government. New York's papers ran breathless coverage after every acquittal, printing his picture on the front pages. This was a guy who just, I don't know, even though he's doing a lot of illegal stuff, he kind of was a hero.
He was.
Sticking it to the man kind of thing.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I know I say that about D.B. Cooper. D.B. Cooper didn't have people killed on the regular. Like, a lot of people are dying at Gotti's hand, and innocent people as well. He was a very violent man. So, yes, he was sticking it to the man. He was beating the system that was keeping so many people poor, but he was also a pretty terrible guy.
You know, earlier I said that he didn't try to hide the fact that he was who he was. You know, I think even in Tennessee in the 1980s, 1990s, people knew who John Gotti was.
Oh, of course.
People knew that there was a mafia and there was a head to the mafia.
When you went to the post office, there was a poster probably.
Probably. So a documentary crew followed him around. Hollywood came calling. Gotti, however, seemed to enjoy every minute of it. But federal investigators were not going to go away, and they had to evolve, get smarter, and try to figure out a way to get this guy. So the FBI had already identified the social club you mentioned earlier as his regular meeting point, and they were watching it very carefully. So his visibility, which had served him so well in the public eye, was beginning to work against him because of the investigators catching on.
Yeah, if you're not wanting to be surveilled or have wires tapped and that kind of thing, letting everybody know where you are all the time is not the best idea. Starting in the late 80s, the FBI launched an aggressive surveillance operation targeting Gotti directly. Now, there have been countless times in history that the government has gone after the mafia. We debated how much role the mafia may have had in the JFK assassination several months ago. Like, the government versus the mafia is a well-treaded topic, but they were targeting Gotti directly. Agents secretly placed listening devices inside the Ravenite Social Club, but also in an apartment upstairs where Gotti would kind of retreat to and have those private conversations with the people he trusted most. And what they captured was extraordinary. When they got up in that apartment especially, Gotti spoke candidly about murders he had ordered, murders he had carried out, about the structure and organizational chart of the Gambino family, and his contempt for other members that he considered unloyal or weak. He criticized associates openly by name. He discussed crimes in remarkable detail, almost like he was giving a detailed confession sometimes, but most of it was in the vein of bragging about it. Perhaps most damaging of all, he was heard repeatedly on tape blaming his underboss, Salvador Gravano, Sammy the Bull, for murders the two had committed together. Gotti seemed to believe that he was being clever. He was putting distance between himself and the crimes, between himself and Gravano, but in reality, he was giving the government a blueprint for how the mafia operated, the things directly he had been involved in, and future plans that he was hoping to carry out.
Sammy the Bull is probably the best name that we've said today.
It is solid.
So Sammy the Bull had become one of Gotti's most trusted men. He was born in Brooklyn, and he had risen through the Gambino family on his own merits. He was a very efficient operator. He had personally committed 19 murders. So this was the kind of guy that you wanted beside you, and you definitely did not want him as an enemy. When Sammy the Bull was arrested along with Gotti in December of 1990, federal prosecutors played him the tapes. He sat and listened as his boss, the man that he had served loyally for years, threw him under the bus on recordings, and he had no idea that these existed. So Sammy made a decision. In 1991, he agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors, becoming one of the most significant mafia defectors in history. This guy's going to turn, and he is going to do the unthinkable.
I mean, it's pretty much a death sentence, but he felt so hurt and so betrayed by what Gotti had done to him that he was willing to do this.
You know, I'm trying to put myself in Sammy's shoes, and of course, you're screwed. But Gotti didn't know he was doing this. It wasn't like he turned on purpose and went to the police.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Why am I getting too wrapped up in this story?
I don't know. I'm willing to put myself in a lot of shoes, probably not in the mafia shoes.
His testimony would provide firsthand accounts of murders, conspiracies, and Gotti's role as boss from someone who had been in the room for all of it. So the Teflon Don was about to find out that his reputation had an expiration date.
And, he had built all this up in just the course of a few years. He took over and he felt untouchable. And a lot of times that's when people make mistakes. And this was a big mistake that he made. This trial in 1992 was unlike anything that had come before. The prosecution had those FBI recordings, they had financial statements, and they had the live testimony of Sammy the Bull Gravano. There was no reasonable doubt to exploit this time. The jury heard Gotti in his own voice discussing crimes and ordering violence that he was being charged with. They heard his primary confidant, Sammy the Bull, describe murder after murder in calm, methodical details. On April 2nd of 1992, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. For the first time since he had become a boss, the government took down John Gotti. On June 23rd of 92, he was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led out of the courtroom, you could see supporters outside because to many, he was still a hero. They were weeping on the sidewalk, let alone the fact that this was going to cause huge disruption within the Gambino family and within kind of the power structure of the New York Mafia. Because unlike his previous prison stints, Gotti's not getting out of this one.
Yeah, he would never walk free again on the outside of prison. He was sent to the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, and one of the most restrictive federal prisons that you could go to in the United States. That's where he was at. He was placed in isolation. He was only allowed out of his cell for 1 hour per day. Is this because of everything bad he had done or as a way to protect him from everybody else? Maybe a little bit of both.
I think they may have used that to justify it, but I think it was mostly just for punitive reasons.
So the man who had spent years holding court on sidewalks, surrounded by admirers and cameras, was now completely alone. So from his cell, he reportedly kept up with the news through magazines and occasional visits from family. His son, John Gotti Jr., had taken over operations for the Gambino family, but the family power was declining rapidly. So Sammy the Bull's testimony had sent a cascade of prosecutions that basically dismantled much of what Gotti had worked so hard to build. In prison, Gotti was diagnosed with throat cancer. This was a condition that worsened steadily over the years. He was eventually transferred to the U.S. Medical Center for Federal Prisons in Springfield, Missouri for treatment, but he refused to cooperate with prosecutors. He never sought a deal. He never gave up a single name. And on June 10th, 2002, John Gotti died in custody at age 61. He had spent the last decade of his life behind bars, isolated from the world that he once dominated. So literally on top of the world to under the prison.
And he did go to his grave remaining silent. So if he spoke about mafia loyalty, even though it was that a break of that loyalty that sent him to prison for good, he maintained it to try to, show that he had some sort of integrity. And the name has really just been public since he was so huge in the 80s. It became the public image of the American mafia. Before him, most of the mob bosses were secretive. They tried to stay behind the scenes. They didn't want to put themselves in the spotlight because that made it more likely for them to get taken down. But Gotti sought attention, made himself a spectacle, and for a time it worked. His acquittals became national news. They were praised by many. His suits became part of his mythology. He turned the mafia into something people watched and gossiped about as if it was like a dramatic TV series. But something worth noting about the gap between the legend and the reality is that the neighborhoods where Gotti grew up and operated, East New York, Howard Beach, it's not like he helped his neighborhoods get better. He grew up there, and he grew up to be one of the people that he admired from a distance. But the people who cheered him on from the courthouse steps were the same people that had to pay him for protection, had to live under the threat of violence from his crews, or had to watch their community suffer because of the drugs he was bringing in, because of the violence he brought to their communities. So those who looked at him as a hero were in many ways the victim, some of the victims of the violence he was setting out in New York.
Before we wrap up, I want to do an update on Sammy the Bull. Again, this was the man whose testimony put Gotti away for life. Well, he didn't exactly ride off into the sunset. Now, he did get a pretty sweet deal. He did end up living under witness protection in Arizona. But while he was there, he was arrested in the year 2000 for running an ecstasy distribution ring. So that's, I remember
so many people often do.
Yeah, I remember in the early 2000s, ecstasy was the next new thing, right?
It was huge, yeah.
So that's what he was doing in Arizona. He was putting his time to good use, obviously. His cooperation deal with the government earned him just a 5-year sentence. And remember, he definitely played a role in 19 murders. So 19 murders in exchange for Gotti only got him 5 years. But his Arizona conviction for the ecstasy ring convicted him and cost him roughly 20 years in prison. So the man who brought down Dapper Don ended up spending nearly as long behind bars as some of the men he helped to prosecute. So the Gambino family still exists today, though it operates far more quietly than it did under Gotti. So the days of a boss holding court on a Manhattan sidewalk are long gone. John Gotti wanted to be seen, he wanted to be famous, and he wanted people to know his name, which, if you really think about it, is not the best way to be a criminal.
Right.
You'd think you'd want to live quietly under the radar. But he got exactly what he wanted, and it ended up with him spending the rest of his life in prison. And he would still be there today, probably, if he hadn't died of old age or throat cancer.
Yeah, I think his story is just a really good example of what happens, even if you're successful in a criminal enterprise, or, even in a legal enterprise. When your ambition outgrows your judgment, you're going to run into problems, and that's what brought him down.
That's a really good statement that you made.
Got it off a fortune cookie.
When your ambition outgrows your
judgment.
Judgment.
Yeah.
Man, kids, remember that. That's a one-liner.
There you go. We should put that in the show notes. Put it on a t-shirt.
We should. When your ambition outgrows your
Did you forget
judgment.
it? Okay, yeah.
No, I was trying to find a way to put moral judgment in there.
We might make a new True Crime Cast t-shirt for that.
Yeah, I'm just so proud.
Don't let your ambition outgrow your judgment, friends.
Yeah, and don't eat yellow snow.
Those are the two pieces of advice that we can give everybody, I think.
Yeah. Man, this was a really good one. John Gotti. I swear I remember 15 years ago hearing one of our pastors saying, hey, we might have someone with the mob come to our church. Obviously, it wasn't John Gotti, because not only was he dead, but if he was still alive, he probably wasn't going to get out of prison.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it wasn't Sammy the Bull, because he was also in jail from selling ecstasy.
There are a lot of mafia families. Maybe it was a different family, but yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. The cornbread mafia runs right down I-75 from Detroit, right? So it runs through here.
Yeah.
That's a different conversation. But this is one I've always been fascinated with. John Gotti is one of those names that you hear a lot about, but you never get the details. So I was excited to share those.
Yep. This was a good one, man. Thank you so much.
Yep. Guys, we really appreciate you. As we mentioned before, would love a 5-star review. We're really close to getting our discount code out for CrimeCon in Las Vegas at the end of May. So make sure you keep an eye out for that.
I think we had mentioned that you weren't going to be there, but things have changed.
Yeah, I don't know if we said that out loud. Maybe we did on Patreon, but yeah, I will be there. John may not.
And Nate will be there.
Nate Dogg.
It is going to be a fun time. We hope you all can come out. I don't know where you live in the world, but around here, flights to Vegas, pretty reasonable.
Pretty cheap, because they expect you to spend all your money when you get there.
Yeah, so you can go gamble, but most importantly, you can see some of the True Crime Cast crew there. Jamie, hopefully really soon we can get those codes out so you can save even more money when you buy your CrimeCon tickets.
Absolutely, guys. We really appreciate y'all.
And until next crime, this has been True Crime Cast.
You've listened to True Crimecast, distributed by Stoveleg Media. Check out stoveleg.com to find out more about your hosts and to find other podcasts to listen to. Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
The world of Sonic the Hedgehog has been thrust into a not-so-dark, not-so-stormy hard-boiled detective story that probably nobody saw coming. Follow Sonic and the intrepid Chaotix Detective Agency as they take on their biggest case yet. This high-flying, action-packed adventure will take them across the world, fighting for every clue they can find. It's one heck of a tale, which is good, because this story might be the only thing that can save their lives.
No. Well, if that's all, I can just dispose of you.
Wait, what?
All will be revealed in Sonic the Hedgehog presents the Chaotix Case Files. Listen now, wherever you get your podcasts.
When the chaotics are